Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. This is a special day today because I'm bringing on a longtime friend of mine who has written a book. He said he was going to write this book, and he actually did it. How many of you have said it and you didn't? I know that list is long, but this list is amazing. The list in his book is amazing. Let me just tell you a little bit about my guest before we bring him on. His name is Ramon Hervey II. He has been a resilient leader in the entertainment industry over the past 4 decades, while helming his own imprint, Hervey Company, one of the most respected boutique entertainment management and brand consultant companies in the business. And this summer, actually this week, Hervey debuts as an author with The Fame Game, an insider's playbook for earning your 15 minutes. You know, we've heard about that 15 minutes of fame. He's going to talk all about it. Throughout his career, Hervey has mined, molded, and managed, mopped up messes, and mounted major comebacks as a publicist and manager. And in The Fame Game, what this is his uncensored, behind the scenes look at the rich and famous as they are rarely seen. So I know you want to know all about it. Let's welcome Ramon Hervey right now. Hey, Ramon.
Hey, Harriet. How you doing?
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I'm still a few days away, but yeah, it's coming right upon us.
It is so exciting. And so, first of all, you explain this in your book. You know, we've heard this idea of 15 minutes of fame that perhaps people are actually due. That this idea that maybe everybody is due 15 minutes of fame, and you kind of push back on that a little bit. But where did this idea of 15 minutes of fame come from?
Well, it came from a statement that was partially credited to Andy Warhol.
Mhm.
He was actually doing a photo shoot with a well-known Swedish photographer, and there were people outside looking in and oogling at him, and they were having a conversation, and they were kind of joking about all these people gawking at them, and he said, yeah, everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame. Everyone wants their 15 minutes of fame. And it was just something the first time I heard it, it just always stuck with me. When I got involved in the entertainment business, I used it more or less as a mantra because I figured when you're a publicist or a manager, your main function is to fuel the illusion, to stardom, and that's all an adjunct of fame. So whenever I assessed clients for potential clients, I kind of started thinking about terms of minutes, like how many minutes could I get with this artist? Were they 15 minutes? Were they 10 minutes? Were there 5 minutes? And that's how I used and assessed talent based on what I thought I could potentially do with them. And I don't believe everyone gets 15 minutes at all.
Yeah, I didn't think you did.
But I do think if you are able to get 15 minutes by quote unquote entertainment standards and you manage it well, strategically well, then you can sustain and have longevity in your career. And if you don't get that much, if you get 10, you can make good money, but you're not going to be on anybody's top 10 list. If you get 5, you're really like a journeyman. You can be a great character actor, but you're really not in the game in the big way. You're not making power moves. Name and cachet value is just not big enough. If you get 2 minutes or less, then you're famous for like a week.
And you know what?
And nobody, you have it. You own your anonymity after with 5 minutes or less. You really don't ever become what they call famous.
Well, there are a whole lot of people who are in that category of wannabe famous
Yes.
who are not, who are in that, let's say, under 5 minutes. But one of the things that you write about in the beginning of your book is looking at the current day where social media and all these other opportunities that exist for people to build fame, even there, where it feels like a more open playing field, there are few people who actually reach that pinnacle. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, first of all, fame, I think a lot of people think fame is a nouveau concept. but actually fame goes back 180,000 years. It was a very early, the first incarnation of fame was the Arcad, a guy named Sard Akkad. He was a famous ruler. He was considered the first famous person in the world, first famous empire. He created the first famous empire. So it's really been around for that long, you know. And there was a guy, a mathematician, who developed a scientific way of trying to compute how many people are famous in the world today. So if you take, he used Wikipedia in terms of how they, like there's over I think there's almost 700,000 people that are recognized by Wikipedia. And then he took the total global amount of people of the global population, which is over 1 billion. Then he divided it, and it ends up at only like a 0.00086. That's how many famous people are in the world today. So your chances are less than 1%. You know, that's how little
you could win the lottery before you become famous.
Exactly, and it's the same thing with all the social media platforms. If you really look at them, there's less than 1% of on every platform that are considered multi-million, have multi-million followers or making money. It's a very, very, very small percentage. But I think, you know, they do offer the opportunity for everybody to have a voice and to have an opportunity to be entrepreneurs, because social media is all they offer you is the exposure. You can use their technology, and it's up to you to decide what you can do with it. They make you believe that if you advertise, if you do this, you know, everybody has these theories, but everyone is guessing. Nobody knows how to um, become famous, because there is no one way to do it. Even if, you know, there's only one Rock, there's only one Kevin Hart, or whoever you want to name, Barack Obama. I mean, the most famous people in the world, it's very difficult to, each one has a different path and a different story on how they became successful, because I believe the key is that fame is not a destination, it's an accolade. So unless you're successful at something, it's very unlikely you're going to become famous.
That's a good point. And you know, at the same time, so just to emphasize your point, fame is not something you can package and put in a bottle and say, here's how you get to this. And you say that very clearly in your book. And at the same time, you spent a whole career helping to craft others' careers and helping to point out the steps that they can take so that they can build that image. So, and you've been successful. So, what is it that you feel your contribution has been, even though there is no secret sauce?
Yeah, if there was a secret sauce, that's what I'd be selling, first of all. I mean, it was like, hey, take this ointment, spread it on all your body every day for 3 weeks, take these pills and exercise, and in 3 weeks you'll become famous. You know, if I could sell that, hey, you know, I'm sure there'd be tons of people out there trying to buy it. But I think my success comes from trying to um, study and find out what are the strengths of my clients, and then to use those strengths in a positive vein to help them achieve success. And I think as you build, you know, if you have clients and they have talent, and you find ways to commercialize and make, you know, it's that balance between art and commerce. Everyone's looking for that. You got to have talent, and then if you have good talent, you have a good team behind you, then there's a possibility of being able to commercially exploit that and creating commerce. So that's in my role, either as a manager or a publicist, that's been my task. And so it's to strategize and to use those things to find that perfect mix, as you said, of letting them expose their talent in the art form that they've selected, and hopefully be able to capitalize on it.
And you've worked with a lot of people who are household names, certainly who have had more than 15 minutes of fame. And in the book, you tell stories about challenges that you faced with these people and how you kind of helped to overcome them. Because the interesting thing is, if they just did what they do and they followed directions, maybe there wouldn't be all these obstacles. And so the person who you begin the book talking about, who I would say everyone listening would know, is Richard Pryor, one of the greatest geniuses ever known, right? And certainly with a comedic bite that will probably be known forever. And yet he had demons. And you write about having to work with him and kind of around some of these demons too. Can you tell us a story?
I mean, yeah, the thing with Richard was one, I was a huge fan of Richard before I even met him. So, and that's been one of, I've been very, very lucky in my career that I've worked with people that I really respect their talents. You know, I've worked with really talented people that I either had already, I knew about them, I owned their albums, I bought them, and to get to work with some of the most talented people in the industry has been a real blessing. So I'm very grateful to that. Um, Richard was one of those people who uh, had demons and he was self-destructive. And it's very difficult to manage someone who is unpredictable and can self-destruct within, seconds or and repeatedly. And one of the things that I marvel about Richard was that, and this is very, very rare. I don't think that people really understand the uniqueness of Richard Pryor in the fact that he made many, many personal missteps and he found a way to market and promote them
He really
commercially.
did. He did.
I'll tell you the thing that I'm most proud of with Richard was it wasn't my, but I was approached by a guy named Bill Sargent, who was a well-known impresario producer. He was the guy who presented, who offered the Beatles $50 million to do a reunion concert, and he got a lot of publicity for doing that. Obviously, it never happened. But he approached me as Richard's publicist and said, "Hey, I'd love to do a live concert with Richard Pryor. Can you help me do that?" And I said, "Well, he's already got a tour in place. I'm not really sure if his manager's going to be interested, but I mean, they're going to want money, and I don't, but based on, I don't know when we could do it." He says, "Look, I'll do it whenever you guys can do it. You help me do it, and I'll even make you a producer." And I said, "No, I don't need to be a producer, but let me find out if I can make it work." And I think as a publicist or a manager, sometimes I do think you have to think out the box and you have to come up with great ideas. But sometimes if you see a great idea, it's okay if you can figure out a way to implement it. To me, great ideas are only good if you can implement them. And I thought this was a great idea. So I fought to make it happen. And it set a pattern of where Richard did 4 or 5 of these. I think he did 4 major live concert films, and at that time it was a nouveau concept.
Right.
I think Lenny Bruce had done one back in the day, but for the most part, he was the first contemporary Black comic to have a major live film concert of his work. And at the time, he was missing his wife, Deborah Pryor, and they got in an argument one night, and she was trying to leave the house, and he shot the tires on her Mercedes. And so this was chronicled in his first live in concert. And in fact, she had the concert was shot in Long Beach, California, and about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the concert, we found out that she had someone serving him with papers, and the guy was waiting around to try to. And we had, arranged a meet and greet for Richard after the concert and everything, and then we found out that was going to happen. So we ushered him immediately off stage into his limo and out so that he couldn't get served with those papers. I mean, eventually he did, and they got divorced. But that night, he didn't want to be dealing with it, so we canceled the party. He left in a huff, and So, but that was the kind of all that kind of stuff happened with Richard all the time. Another time when I was in his home, he was supposed to go meet. He was supposed to go run in a 40-yard dash with Muhammad Ali at the Muhammad Ali Invitational Track Meet.
Wow.
And he was up there with David Banks and Paul Mooney, who were longtime friends, and they were collaborators with him on many of his projects. And they were up there, and when I got there, I think they were all high. And I told Richard, hey, we need to. He lived in Northridge, and I said it's time because we had to go to Long Beach for that too.
That's which is far.
Yeah, which is far. And I said, Richard, it's about time we got to get together to get there. So he said, okay, I'll go downstairs and then take a shower. Those guys left. I'm sitting upstairs by myself in his den, and the phone rings, and it rang, several times. So I figured maybe he was in the shower, and I decided I would go ahead and answer. I said, hi, Richard, it's the prior resident. And he goes, Ramon, it's Richard. And I go, oh, hey, Richard, what's up, man? And he goes, well, I don't think I'm in condition to go. So I go, well, I mean, you gave your word, he's counting on it, but if you're not willing to go, then I'll find out. I'll get him on the phone or I'll leave a message for him. He goes, no, I want you to go down there and tell him in person. So Richard always had this way of trying to, he thought doing these little things like telling the person, rather than calling him by phone, having one of his people go and talk to him would be better than just calling. So I ended up having to go down there with his security guard, Rashan. And
this story, let me just tell folks, this story and so many others are in Ramon's book, The Fame Game. You've got to get a copy. Let me remind folks, you're listening to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. We are talking to Ramon Hervey. He has written a new book, The Fame Game. It's an insider's look. Ramon has spent his entire career working with celebrities, helping to build their image, helping to put them in a place, as he just described, to be as successful as possible. And the behind the scenes stories are fascinating in just what we just heard from him, things that you just absolutely wouldn't know unless you were there, because Ramon's job was to make sure that these stories didn't get published, right? You spent all this time.
Well, yeah, more or less. I mean, I think in the days before social media, most celebrities had, an enormous amount of privacy,
right?
When you really think about it. So, and when you look at social media, it's like a teenager. It's not even a teenager. It's only been going. Facebook really didn't really hit it until around 2010, even though most of the formats all started around mid 2004, 5, and 6. YouTube, all of them started in the same time, but they didn't really connect with mass appeal audiences until around the 10th year, around 2010. So all of these are only been around for 12 years. So any celebrities before that, there was a silence and privacy where you couldn't have access to them. They weren't videoed where at restaurants or whenever they did something stupid, so it's really still a new, we put a lot of onus on it, but it's still very, very new when you think that radio, print, television, print and radio have been around since the 1800s. Or earlier, so it's pretty amazing when you think of the dramatic shift of how celebrity and fame has changed in just since 2010.
And given that point, I go back to the original point that you made. Even though that's true, we still have just a small number of people who are truly famous.
Yes.
Even with this opportunity, explosion of communication that has come. So you have worked with lots of people. The Bee Gees, we said Richard Pryor, Vanessa Williams, Babyface, so many. Tell me some more names, just so folks can hear who some of the other people you work with, and then we'll go and pick one of them to talk about.
I worked with Daryl Hall and John Oates, Peter Frampton, Don Cornelius, Quincy Jones, Minnie Riperton, Ashford and Simpson, Natalie Cole, George Benson, Joe Sample, Terry Lynn Carrington, Anita Baker,
Andre Crouch.
Andre Crouch. That was actually my longest. I represent him both as a publicist and a manager. Um, uh, Chic with Nile Rodgers. I worked with the Jacksons when Michael Jackson within their first album Away from Motown. I worked with the Commodores when they had when Lionel Richie was still a member of the Commodores, and those guys left me on tour one time. Didn't give me my pickup time, and were on the plane. And I go downstairs for what I thought was a pickup time, so just all kinds of, stories like that. I worked with Stevie Wonder, on probably one of the biggest albums of his career, Songs in the Key of Life.
Oh my goodness.
I worked with Marvin Gaye. I produced a show once where Muhammad Ali did an exhibition and fought Marvin Gaye, Sammy Davis Jr., Richard Pryor, and Burt Young from Rocky, and we did that at the Olympic Auditorium. That was fun.
And you write about that in the book. That's a great story that you tell.
Yeah,
that's
that was a great story. So yeah, I've been very, very fortunate. Tina Turner. I worked with Tina Turner. I mean, there's literally not a single artist that I can think of over the last 20 years or so that I didn't touch at some time or another that I would want to work with. I really feel like I've been really blessed to work with, some of the most talented artists, of our time, of modern contemporary music, and actors too, and actresses. I worked with Daphne Rubin Vega. I worked with James Caan. I worked with Elliot Gould. People like that as well. So
let's talk about Stevie. I mean, he has had such an incredible and long career. You worked with him on a signature piece of work that everybody probably knows. What was it like to work with him? What's he like?
Stevie is a complex person, but he's really down to earth and he's really funny. He's got a great sense of humor and sense of himself. My greatest moment with Stevie Wonder was in a marketing meeting for the Songs in the Key of Life. And he came to Motown to meet with all the major executives because he wanted to know what were they going to do to market the record. And one of the things, and I was so excited, I just remember this was very early on in my career. I was just starting off. I was a burgeoning publicist. So when I found out that I was going to be able to be part of this meeting, I was geeked. I was just so excited. And then when I sat in the meeting, he said at one point, he goes, well, look, I want a billboard in Times Square that's so big and so bright that even I can see it. And that's the kind of humor that he had, but he was dead serious. He knew what he wanted, and it was just, and I remember as soon as I got out of that meeting, I called a couple of friends of mine. I said, you won't believe this. I was just in a meeting with Stevie Wonder, and this is what he said. And I've stuck to that. And I remember seeing Stevie later in his career, and I told him the impression that he made on me in that meeting. And I said, do you remember saying this? Because I've never forgotten it. He goes, yeah, I do remember saying that. But we've been friends, we're not close buddies, but when I started R&B Live, a club concept in LA, he called me up and said, hey, Ramon, I've heard about your club. I want to come down there and perform.
Awesome.
Would that be cool? And I go, Stevie, come on.
Yes.
You can perform whenever you want, man. Just come down. You don't have to perform. Just come down and see what we're doing. Listen to what we're doing and stuff. And he started coming and he played several times. The first time that he came, he said, I want to play, and went up on stage and he played for like 25 minutes. And that was he just was. So he's been supportive of me from afar We had a couple of meetings about management back in the day. He asked me about a project that he wanted to do, but he's a tough guy to nail down, um, and he's always late. Um,
That
but
seems to be the through line for many celebrities, right?
but yeah, but he's got a great heart, and he's done so much with his career. There would be no Martin Luther King national holiday without Stevie
That's
Wonder.
right. I marched when we were marching with him on Washington to make that a holiday. He's done so many things, being an activist as well as an artist, which is
Yeah, and he pointed out a lot of when he was in his winning streak at his peak as an artist. It became apparent that every time he received an award, he was going to recognize somebody, a lesser Black talent that deserved. Bumps Blackwell was one person that he exposed on national TV. Bumps Blackwell had written for Elvis Presley. He had written for Little Richard, who I managed, who I didn't mention in the other segment. Um, but that was also another thing that I always liked about and respected about him, is that he knew the history of our music, and he always used his platform to help shed a light on those who were less famous than he was.
that, and he didn't have to do that,
No,
which
he
is
didn't
right,
at
right.
all.
You mentioned Little Richard. So in that chapter, you talk about the fact that usually people don't even get there one time to be famous. He had already had two times at that point and was coming back for part three after he had become a minister and, gone from this flamboyant gay personality, larger than life personality, to becoming a minister. Uh, what was it like working with him at that point in his career when, another comeback, which is so rare for it to happen successfully?
Well, the funny thing is I got involved with Richard to work on his book, Little Richard, the Quasar of rock and roll. And it was written by an English disc jockey. And the book was distributed by Crown Machine, and I had done a very successful book promotion with Bette Midler on her book, The Saga of Baby Divine. And so they called me up and said, "Hey, Ramon, would you be interested in reading this galley and Little Richard? We'd love for you to consider representing the book." So that's how I got involved with Little Richard. And, initially, I did get the impression that he wanted a major comeback music wise. He was doing his gospel thing, but he wasn't very successful. He was living in Riverside at the time. He had done a couple of gospel recordings, but he wasn't like a well-known preacher or gospel recording artist, and he was kind of tattered and disheveled when I met him the first time. But then the uh, the campaign for the book started to go well, and I got him a lot of coverage on the book, and um, I got him in a movie um, down out in Beverly Hills with Bette Midler, Richard Dreyfuss, and
Sure.
Nick Nolte, who were all former clients of mine at Rogers and Cowan, and so he started to feel, you know, this is when I think I can make a comeback, you know. But it still was unclear on what he was willing to do, because he was torn between the his path that he has chosen, one from being rock and roll, and whether he could do that again and still live with his transition that he was trying to make in the gospel industry. But at one point, he completely switched. And the night that it happened, I decided that I knew that he was a fan of Prince, and he believed that he had influenced Prince. So I got tickets for us to go see Prince at Universal Amphitheater. And up until that time, an afro, he didn't really look like a rock and roll star at all. But he was starting to gain, he was getting television coverage, and he was slowly changing, loosening up, and kind of going a little bit back. So he was staying at the Hyatt Hotel on Sunset, and he came downstairs to get in the limo to go to the concert, and he had switched his whole thing. He had like a Jerry curl, He had on a blue suit with rhinestones on it. He had blue shoes. I mean, he looked like he had gone back in time.
Wow.
And I was just stunned. I said, "Oh shoot, you really turned out. You got all like you're like
You're
the
going to see
new
Prince.
yeah, going to see Prince." And that's he wanted to present himself as a star at that concert, and so he changed up everything.
Wow.
And from that point on, that became his new look, and that's the look that he used in the movie where
Yeah.
he played a gospel artist, Otis Whitehead, who lived in Beverly Hills next door to Bette Midler and Richard Dreyfuss, and Nick Nolte was a homeless person who befriended them, and that's how that whole story is about.
I remember that movie.
Yeah.
That's a good movie. Let me remind folks, you're listening to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. We are talking to Ramon Hervey, who has written a book, a juicy book, all kinds of stories about celebrities whose names you definitely know, but stories that you don't know. He worked as a publicist and also manager for some of these artists. And in the fame game, you get to read all of these interesting stories that are way behind the scenes. Many, I'm sure you don't know because Ramon hasn't told them before, in this way anyway. And he's put them in this book. Ramon is a really great writer, I have to say. So I'm enjoying reading the stories, and I'm sure that you will too. I want to say to everybody listening, WBAI has no sponsors other than you. This is a community sponsored radio station, which means every dollar that we get is because there's somebody listening who decides this is valuable. We care about the content. We know that we're telling the truth, and we bring on great guests like Ramon Hervey. So if you feel it in your heart to donate today, please do. You can call us at 212 209 2950. I'll repeat the number 212 209 2950. You could also go online and give to the numeral to WBAI.org. Make a contribution in any amount. Any amount at all is helpful. We got to pay the telephone bill, the gas bill, all those bills just like everybody else. And that paycheck is whatever you generously offer to us. So we thank you in advance for your generosity. So Ramon, I met you when I was at Essence Magazine shortly after I started working there. And yeah, I think it was in 84 or 85. Vanessa Williams had been made the first Black Miss America. And you write about this in your book that you had been brought on to work with her uh, for publicity right before, I think it was right before she became Miss America. And then, the whole world changed when she was dethroned, and you talk about it a lot in the book. Um, you ended up falling in love with her, marrying her, having 3 kids with her, and you still have family with her. Uh, it's a whirlwind. It's this whirlwind story that you describe really well in your book. But you had been working in this space for a long time before you got to Vanessa, and were asked because of your expertise. Tell us about how the approach that you were able to develop when, at this time, it's so different now. Um, she fell from grace because these nude pictures were found of her. I don't know whether that would happen today, but back then it was a huge fall. How did you help her resurrect her career?
Well, first of all, I was never hired before the thing happened, before her
Okay.
crisis. So what I was approached to, there was a friend of mine, a former client of mine who I represented, who is Phoebe Beasley. She's a very well-known artist. She does collages, really nice woman. She was from, I believe, Cleveland, Ohio, and she had a friend named Dennis Dowdell, who was worked for American Can, but they went to the same college. I forget the name of the college they went to. Anyway, she said, "Hey, I have this friend." She called me up one day. She said, "I have a friend who's consulting with Vanessa Williams. Do you know who she is?" I said, "Yeah, I know who she is." And I remember the day that she won the contest. I lived in LA at the time, and I saw the picture of her, and I said, "Oh, she's cute." And I was very happy for her that she won. And whenever anyone black breaks a barrier like that, I thought, good for her. That's another barrier that we have broken. Although I wasn't a follower of Miss America, it wasn't my thing. But I was proud, to cheer her on from afar. But anyway, so I said, yeah, I knew who she is and that she had won. And she said, well, my friend is he's a neighbor of the family, and he's consulting them, and she wants to go into the entertainment business after her run as Miss America. And I suggested they talk to you to consider for publicity. So that was the original
I
seed.
see.
And I said, okay, sure, you can refer me to Dennis. I spoke to Dennis. We were in New York on a trip to New York, and he said, "Oh, I think Vanessa would really like you, and I'd like you to meet her at some point while she's on the road. She's traveling every day, blah blah blah." And I said, "Sure, that'll be fine. Just give me a couple of days' notice, and I'm happy to do that." And then I didn't hear from him for a while, and he came to me out of the blue and just said, "Hey, Ramon, I have a problem, and I wanted to get your feedback on it." And I said, "Okay, what's the problem?" And he says, "Well, there's a rumor that there's some pictures of Vanessa Williams, nude pictures of Vanessa Williams are floating around, and I don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, have you seen the pictures? Do you know any details?" And he said, "No, I just heard a rumor." So I said, "Well, don't do anything." I said, "Let me scout around. Let me find out if I can find out anything." And then I couldn't find out anything. I said, "Look, just hang in there. Don't say anything. Don't do anything until you know real and you see them." So then he called me back, and he told me he had been sent the magazine. He saw the pictures, and that the pageant had seen the pictures, and had given Albert Marks, who's the director of the pageant, had given Vanessa 72 hours to resign, basically. And so he said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, I think we should probably do." And I was in LA and he was in New York, so we were doing this all by the phone. So I said, "Look, if you want me to manage this crisis for you, got to let me know that I have the freedom to put together what I think should do." And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, I'm turning it over to you. You tell me what to do." So I suggested we do a press conference at the very 72 hours. So I started putting the press conference together on that Friday afternoon from LA so that we could do a photo news alert that would be out to people so that we could find out by Monday at 11. That was the cutoff time. That's when we were going to make the announcement. So I hired a friend of mine who had a small PR company, boutique company in New York, a guy named Ed Callahan, and he helped me to orchestrate putting together the press conference at the Sheraton Hotel on 7th Avenue. And then I took a red eye into New York on that Friday night. I got there Saturday morning to meet Vanessa for the first time and her family. And Dennis picked me up at the airport. I went out to Millwood and I met her around 8 o'clock in the morning. And the story was so much bigger than I ever had imagined because there was an encampment of media, like over 400 media people were
Wow.
sequestered out of her house. I mean,
Which
it
is in
was just,
suburban New York. This is not
yeah,
like,
this is like in Millwood, 45 minutes north of in Westchester County. So I'm just, Jesus, this is crazy.
right.
I went, but so it was an ominous task, but so basically that's how and then I framed her statement and everything. And in the book, I tell the story because my feeling was she should just give it up. There was no point. I didn't think that even if she decided to fight for it, that they would have had an injunction to prevent her from participating. It was 2 weeks before the end anyways, and the only thing left for her to do was hand off the crown on the special where they do the pageant. And I knew they weren't going to let her do that.
Right.
So I just said, you should just give it up. But the lawyers, her parents, everybody decided, no, we'll fight for this. And at the very end, so I prepared a statement saying that she was not going to resign. And then in the final hour, in the 71st hour, I don't want to give away the whole thing, but in the 71st hour, after I've already done a statement, I've had copies of them and everything. We're all set up. There's over 300 press people gathering in this red press room. And they tell me the plan has changed. She's gonna resign. So I have to rewrite, print out the new statements, get them to her, get her to sign off what she was going to read, because she wasn't going to take questions from the audience, from the press or whatever. She was just going to read this statement. So I had to recraft it and then get it to her to say, hey, are you comfortable? Can you deliver this? So we had, all this was happening in lightning speed time, getting all the copies done, getting them ready to be distributed to the press, giving her enough time. Like she had literally like 20 minutes to reassess and put herself in the frame of mind to read the statement. And so went on, and we pulled it off, but it's the craziest press conference I've ever been involved with.
Well, and I remember it. I mean, many people remember it because she had reached such a pinnacle. Like you said, this was the first time, and we celebrate first, especially for Black people. And then there was the feeling of shame and disgrace. And when we saw her, though, she was really poised. And that is what we have seen of Vanessa, from then and onwards. And honestly, most people don't remember who Miss America is. Vanessa Williams is undoubtedly the most famous Miss America ever.
Right.
And she has really built an incredible career for herself. But you talk about how challenging it was at first, like hands off at first.
And it was, I don't, that's another misnomer in our business, is that any publicity is good publicity. I don't agree with that. That's not true. And I think now you see it coming when people like Dave Chappelle can be canceled over controversial remarks. A lot of people are getting canceled these days. Good publicity, any publicity is not good publicity, and that's being proven over and over again long before that. But yes, there was shame and liability. I think, one, because she was Black. Two, she wasn't the person that was portrayed in the photos, also wasn't the exact goody two-shoes of being a Miss America. She was somewhere, she hadn't found herself. She was only 21 years old. So she really didn't represent either image. And so she was caught between both. And my job was to encourage her to find out, who do you want to be? Because we have to find a way to develop an image that doesn't represent either of these. Since from what I gathered from getting to know her as a friend and as a confidant, she wasn't either one. So I said, our challenge and your challenge is to find an image that you live with, that you want to fuel and develop if you want to be successful in the entertainment business, since that's your goal. And so that's where I think I helped her to help define who she wanted to be. And I told her, because historically, the entertainment business has not been that friendly for Black women.
Sure.
It's been harder for Black women to become successful in the entertainment business than even Black men. And at that time, there weren't a lot of role models to look up to. If you look at maybe Lena Horne or Dorothy Dandridge, there was only a handful. There wasn't really, again, even though there was no template necessarily to follow. And what I think the one thing that I suggested to her that paid off was let's go the music industry route. Because with the music industry, you can at least create your own image. You can get people. She was a singer. she was a contemporary music singer, but she had a good voice. She had a natural, strong, good voice and very pop friendly, and maybe not as urban friendly, but she was soulful. And so I said, if we can be successful in the music industry, then it'll open those other doors that you want: Broadway, film, and television. So that was really the strategy. And I respect her immensely for her ability to carve a path out for herself based on that. I don't think she spent enough time on the music. I think if she spent a little bit more time on the music, she would have become a bigger star. But I was only involved in the first decade of that. But I'm forever indebted to her as, my ex-wife, as the mother of my children, for giving me the gift of children, for giving me the gift of family. I mean, I love her. I would do anything for her, but I'm not in love with her, and that's a difference. But I love her, and I think we've done a great job as parents. Um, and I pull for her, whatever she's doing. I don't follow everything, but I pulled for her most recent Broadway production. I thought she was good in it.
She
And
sure was.
we have family gatherings. I met her other husbands, and we're dysfunctional, but we made it work, so.
Which is a true blessing. Let me remind
Right.
folks, you're listening to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. We are talking to Ramon Hervey. He is telling us so many good things about his life and this new book that he's written called The Fame Game, which really takes a look into the stories and the creating of lives and careers that he's been a part of for so very many years. I want to go back to talking to him, so I want to remind you we need your support. Please support us. You can call right after this broadcast, 212-209-2950. We need your support in order to stay on the air. And it's really that simple. Uh, I've been doing this show for 4 years. I remember telling Ramon when I first was thinking about it. And here we are 4 years later, which is kind of amazing. Time does fly. But I get to be here because of your support. So please call us and make a contribution today, 212-209-2950. You can also go online and give to the numeral 2, WBAI.org. So Ramon, as another artist that actually I was gonna go to Babyface, but you tell this story that I have to go to first. I love Luther Vandross. Like, I'm a diehard Luther Vandross fan. And you tell a story about Luther Vandross that people don't know, that when he was working with Bette Midler. And I just, can you tell us about Luther? First of all, did you work with him much? What was he like through your eyes?
I worked with Luther a couple times throughout his career. The first time I worked with him was when he was singing with Bette Midler. He was one of the most respected session singers in the business. He did a bunch of jingles, and he had worked with a lot of other artists. I think the Rolling Stones. He was a top backup singer, but the way Bette used him was that he did all the high parts for her and the Harlettes, but he was never featured on front of stage. So what they did is they created a curtain box for him, and he would sit there and he would sing the places where he was needed. He had a stool, he had a table, he had a plate of food that he would eat between takes,
Oh my goodness.
and but he was in those days he was very humble. He was very big. He weighed over, probably like around 350 pounds.
Maybe even more. He
Or
was a
more,
big
somewhere
guy.
between 350 and 400 pounds.
Right.
That's how big he was when I first met him.
Wow.
And I remember we were in San Francisco, and I think we were staying at the Four Seasons Hotel, and we had Bet had a show at the Concord. I had a couple of meetings, and I was supposed to go in the limo with Bet to the show, and I missed the limo. So I told her, I said, "Hey, Bet, just leave, go without me. I'll catch one of the rental cars, and I'll be there shortly. I'll be behind you by maybe 20 minutes or so." So I left word for her, and then when I got back to the hotel, some of the rest of the entourage were supposed to be gathering down, and Luther was the only one in the lobby at the time. And so I said, "Hey, do you want to catch a ride with me to the venue? We'll go together, so I don't waste the whole car just on myself." He says, "Yeah, I'll go with you." So we had a driver. We both sat in the back, and he was so big. I literally was like leaning against the back. It wasn't even like a luxury town car. It was just like a regular rent a car, and we were like glued in this back seat. And it was in the summer, and it was very, very hot. I think it was over 100 degrees.
Wow.
And I was sweating, and Richard was, and Luther was sweating profusely. And I started to get worried because he was getting short of breath. And we didn't have any water or anything. I said, "Hey, Luther, man, are you cool? Because if you need water, we can stop. I don't have, we can just pull over and
Right.
you can get some air and we'll get you some water, whatever." And he said, "No, man, it's okay. It's okay. I'm good. I'm used to this. This could happen to me if I'm walking up a flight of stairs. I'm very used to it, but I'm not going to die or anything like that." I said, "Well, you should, think about losing a little weight because it doesn't
Did you
sound
say
like."
that?
Yeah, yeah. I just say, he goes, "Yeah, I know, I should. I'm working on it." And I go, "Okay, good," because it just seems unsafe.
Well, and he
I'm
did.
worried about it. I didn't put it as a diss, but just as I cared about him. You
Right.
know, and I said it in that way that I'm caring about you. And so
Right.
I was encouraging him. And we talked, and so that's how I first met him. And then when I got, and that was when I was a publicist. Then his manager, Shep Gordon, was I ended up enlisting in his company, and Shep was one of the first people to give me a break. Yeah, and I became part of his management company. I worked under Shep, and so he assigned me to Luther on the West Coast, and the other guy, a guy named Danny Marcus, was his day-to-day guy, but Danny lived in New York. So I worked with those two, and basically, with Danny was really running the day-to-day activities of Luther, and so I handled him on the West Coast whenever he did any TV or whatever. I did that, and so I got to know him in a different way. And then he had gone through a couple of surgeries to reduce his weight, and he was constantly struggling with his weight.
Sure.
But he's by far one of the best singers that I've ever worked with. I mean, his natural voice is just incredible. The things that he could do with his voice, and he worked really, really hard. He made a lot of money touring. I mean, he could tour 2 times a year easily. That's how him and Frankie Beverly, those guys in those
Oh
days,
yeah.
yeah, they could tour.
Frankie Beverly is still touring.
Yeah, the people, black communities loved him. So Richard could
That's
tour.
true.
I mean, Luther could tour, a couple times a year, and he had parties at his house with Whitney and Dion, and he loved Vanessa, so they came over. And I also worked with Anita Baker, and she opened for Luther, and it was one of the worst tours ever. They hated each other. So that was really difficult. It was after I had stopped working with Anita and I was working with Luther then, but they couldn't even. We had to work it out so that they wouldn't see each other passing in the same way to the stage.
Ooh.
It got to be that bad.
See, these are the stories, y'all. Let me just tell you, this book, The Fame Game, has all kinds of little juicy stories that. So let me say this too, because you don't diss anybody. So if you're looking for this, you're not going to get that in this book. What Ramon does is to really frame the story so you understand what was going on at that time, who the players are, what's going on culturally, and then some of this juicy behind the scenes stuff. So believe it or not, our time is up, Ramon. So what that means is folks just have to go out and get your book, The Fame Game.
That's great. Well, next
It's here.
August 16th, that's the
There you
official
go.
release date. So hopefully
August
people will
16th.
buy it. And I appreciate this time. And I always enjoy talking to you. It's always kind of funny to be interviewed by one of your best friends.
I know.
But you always make it easy and fun. So I thank you so much for your time and for helping me and support this book.
Thank you. I'm so proud of you. You are a great writer, which look, as a writer, I appreciate when somebody really can write. And these stories are so beautifully written and you just dive in. So I'm telling you, everybody, go out and get The Fame Game. You're going to love it. And thank you and congratulations, Ramon.
Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, you've been listening to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole with my good friend Ramon Hervey. Go and get that book right now, The Fame Game, August 16th. It is going to be available. You can pre-order it right now and get it in just a few days. We enjoy being together. Thank you so much. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.